Hey, what's happening? Yeah, hope y'all are doing well. And let's get a little world studies in. We're going to be on page 322. Now, watch the entire video. Just don't skip to the end. But I have some very important instructions for you at the end, several things to go through. And we'll get there. But anyway, page 322. Because we talked about it last time we met, is we talked about the world at war. And now we're going to talk about the developments after, well, developments during this time period in science and art. Page 322. And one thing that you're going to see, I read a book years ago called The God of Music. This was a Christian author, and he talked about how music back during the Beethoven era, Handel, all the old Baroque and classical music, church music, it had beauty to it. And it had melody to it. And those of you that love music, you understand what I'm talking about. It had a beauty to it. And the more you got into the late 19th century and especially in the 20th century, music became without a melody, non-melodious. It, as far as classical music is concerned, it became simplified. And this author basically put it that these composers of years ago, they wrote their music, they penned their music, they arranged their music to glorify God. And it was representative of God's beauty and God's nature and God's awe. That's why sanctuaries and cathedrals were built with this mass just beauty to them, because it represented the majesty of our God, of Yahweh. And the more you get away from that concept of God in everything, which we know God is in everything and everything we do should be to glorify God, the more you get into, well, this emptiness, this void, people that don't recognize God. That is how the art of this period, it reflects that, this emptiness. The music of this period reflects that emptiness. The architecture, to a certain extent, reflects that emptiness. So we'll get into all that, and we're just going to kind of motor through, and then I'll give you a schedule for the remainder of the week. First of all, your book talks about scientific experiments and theories. Pierre and Marie Curie, they were French physicists. Basically, they worked with radioactive matter, and you can ask Mr. Stone about that. He'll be glad to explain more about how you break down particles and all of this stuff in the building blocks of the universe, so to speak. So ask him. He'll help you there. Albert Einstein, big name. Everybody has heard of Albert Einstein. He worked with the relationship between matter and energy. Most of you are familiar with E equals mc squared. But he also is considered the father of modern physics. He talked about black holes out in space, which, come to find out, we think there are. He talked about the vastness of the universe. Now, the problem is he did it from a scientific standpoint. And there's nothing wrong with science and scientific standpoint. But I think Einstein missed that there was a creator that put all of this into being. The scary thing about, or good thing about Albert Einstein is back in the 1930s, he was a Jewish physicist, and he lived in Germany. And he fled Nazi Germany because things were getting bad for Jews. Things were getting bad over there. He fled to the United States for safety. And one thing that he did when he got here is he warned the United States that German scientists were working on what would amount to an atomic bomb. And as a result of that and some other things, FDR started the Manhattan Project. So you can thank in part Albert Einstein for at least tipping us off on that. Could you imagine if the Germans had had a nuclear bomb or an atomic bomb and we knew nothing of it and they used it on us? It would have been a whole different world. Science was also used in the improvement of things that already existed. Automobiles, for instance. Could you imagine you hop in the car which we can't go anywhere right now, but you hop in the car in the morning and you're going to go to work or to school or wherever your family is going to go, and you crank it up and you put her along at 5, maybe 10, if you really open it up, maybe 20 miles an hour. Could you imagine taking off to the beach, max speed of 30, no air conditioning, all of those things? Scientists helped improve the self-propulsion of cars, the bigger engines, diesel running engines. All of those things were going to come about because of scientists, and they really started working. Even weapons, tanks, the improvements of tanks, your book mentions that. But the powerful engines were a big thing that scientists are going to rev up, pun intended, during this time. The other thing was railroads. They took them from the coal-burning type engines to developing diesel-powered engines, those type of things, and that helped improve railways. Another thing was mass consumption. Now, a lot of these things were already invented, but if I invent a refrigerator, okay, no one has a refrigerator, and I make 2 of them this year, or I make 10, or I make 1,000. How much are those going to cost? A bunch. But if I make 100,000 of them, the price automatically has gone down because there's a demand for them, and now there's a supply. And scientists helped to mass produce some of these things. Your book mentions bicycles, refrigerators, radios. At one time, there were radios, but they were so expensive you couldn't buy them. I always use the example, the big screen, flat screen televisions. Man, when those boogers first came out, they were, awful. They were astronomical. And now you can go to Walmart and for, $199 or something like that, get you a fairly nice big one. Somewhere in there. The first CD player I ever bought for a vehicle was back in 1990, I believe it was. And I think I paid $750 for it. I was young, I was dumb, I was in college, and I thought, man, I've got to have that for my truck. And I bought that. And now you could buy the same thing at Walmart, if you can still get CD players at Walmart. I guess you can, for probably $79.95 or less. So science helped make improvements and mass produce things that we already had. Another thing that put those into homes was credit. Now, credit on some things is good, I would guess. If you're going to go buy a house, it's hard to drop, that large amount of cash. But people were buying stuff on credit, small things, from furniture to refrigerators to stoves to television, well, not televisions, but those type of things. And, well, you're going to have to pay one of these days. And it causes a lot of economic problems from time to time. Also, they developed artificial fibers. Rayon and acetate were invented. Nylon was invented. It was a substitute for silk. Felt similar to silk, had the same characteristics, but you didn't have to wait for the silkworm to produce it. Your book talks about art. We're on page 323 now. And it starts with literature. Now, the literature of this time period is not great. T.S. Eliot was one of the writers. He wrote a poem called The Waste Land. There was a German writer named Thomas Mann who wrote a poem basically saying we're all victims of the forces of the universe. We have no control. And as your book rightly points out, it expressed misery, it expressed gloom, this despair. And a lot of it happened that way in the art world. Expressionism, Cubanism, forms of painting, or Cubism, not Cubanism, Expressionism and Cubism. And Expressionism, you'll see 2 examples. On the left, you see The Scream by Edvard Munch. But basically, your book explains it, and it's a very good explanation. Expressionism, I look at you, I paint a picture. I don't paint what I see. Used to, they painted for beauty. I mean, if you painted a woman or a male, you tried to make them look nice. You tried to make them look beautiful, pleasing. And in Expressionism, I would look at an object and paint it what I thought of it. Not what I see, but what I think of it. So if I think you're a terrible ogre, then I would paint you as a terrible ogre, even though you don't look like it. That type of thing. And Cubism, you took those same ideas, but you painted with geometrical shapes. And if you look at the right-hand side, bottom of 323, how you call that art, I don't know. I hope none of y'all have that hanging in your house. But that is Pablo Picasso, 1910. That's an example of Cubism. So the art world changed at this point. And I wrote down in my book, because this is the way it goes from, art went from being about beauty. You would look at a landscape and you say, man, that's pretty, that's nice, makes me want to go there. To art was painted to strike up a conversation or to cause controversy. So art really changed in that concept. Architecture. We want to talk about three names. Louis Sullivan, he developed the concept of the skyscraper. You'll see at the very bottom, the Prudential Building in Buffalo, New York, bottom of 324. You'll see an example of that. Also, Walter Gropius, he came up with functional architecture, and you'll see his building on the left right there. It was built for function, not for looks. You'll notice that is not a very pretty building. Now, the Prudential Building is very nice, but the functional building looks bland, but it was built for function. And then one that I absolutely love, I love his houses, Frank Lloyd Wright. And if you'll look to the right there on your page, he wrote several. If you get a chance, go online and look at some of his houses that he built. Basically, it was where you could blend it into the surroundings. The architecture blended into the surroundings. If you ever get to see the Florence or Muscle Shoals, and I've driven by it several times, but I can't remember because I used to live in that area for a time. There is a Frank Lloyd Wright designed house in either Florence or Muscle Shoals, Alabama. You can actually tour it if you call and go through it. I just never have. I've always wanted to, but very unique. He had some that he would build waterfalls. I mean, just really neat stuff. But you'll see a picture of that there. Last thing your book talks about, page 324, is media. Printing machines became more easily accessible, more affordable, better. Mass production of paper. They produced it from pulpwood, reduced the cost of printing forms and newspapers and magazines, all of those things. Those became more widely accessible. Also, advertisement started. And I worked in advertisement in the radio field for, 17 years, something like that. And advertisement really comes to the forefront at this time. Magazines, newspapers, you pick them up, it's all about advertising. And then radio and later television. I mean, you can't watch television without advertising. They're going to throw one in somewhere. Look at YouTube, pull up a video, and there'll be an advertisement in between. They want you to either get a service or buy a product. And this is when that really comes to the forefront. Moving pictures were developed during these years in the early 1900s. Movies, as we call them, films. They added sound to them. They called them talkies. People came. The bad thing about it, they had more movie theaters at one point or close to it per capita in the United States than they did churches. And people started worshiping entertainment, so to speak, more than they did the creator of all things. And radio improved. Mass production of radio improved. The technology behind radio improved. And that changed the world. For a time when you used to couldn't hear a ball game. I mean, if you wanted to hear a ball game, which I'd love to hear or see one right now, baseball, for instance, if the Brooklyn Dodgers were playing at the time, if you wanted to know what was going on with the Brooklyn Dodgers, you either read about it in the paper the next day or you went to Brooklyn to see it. And when radios became mass produced, when they became cheaper, you could get one in every home. Everybody in America could tune in that was within signal shot, and the signals for the AMs back then were huge. And you could listen, everybody, to the Brooklyn Dodgers or the president give an address, those type of things. And these things all improved. So as far as the entertainment mediums improved, at least quality did. All right, a couple of things I want to share with you real quick. First of all, write this down. Is this thing on? Yeah. Write this down. Write down 1 o'clock Central on Friday. If you live in the Central Time Zone, 1 o'clock on Friday. If you live in the Eastern Time Zone, write down 2 o'clock on Friday. I mentioned in yesterday's video to everyone about Zoom. Zoom! And if you haven't downloaded it yet, if you're using a mobile device, that's what I'm using, then download it. If you have a laptop or computer, if you haven't used it, and some y'all's class may have already, but on Friday I'm going to send a meeting code and a password, and I want you to come into the meeting at 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern. We won't spend too much time in there, but that'll give us just an opportunity to see each other, to hear each other, especially me. Y'all may have already had that opportunity in other classes, but I haven't got to see your faces or hear your voices in a couple of weeks, and want to talk about a couple of things as we get close to finishing out the year. So we're going to do that on Friday, 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern. Please be there if at all possible for that virtual class meeting. Tomorrow, which will be Wednesday, we're going to look at the Great Depression. And it's 2 pages. We're going to finish that tomorrow. On Thursday, we are going to take an open book test. So Thursday will be an open book test. And it should be easy. And again, it's open book. But we'll kind of talk tomorrow as to what will be on it. But it'll be fairly easy, but want to give you an opportunity to test. And we may, later on this semester, if we're still doing virtual, we may do a Zoom where I watch you take a test and we do it closed book. But for right now, we're just trying to get back in the swing of things. Learn this material, and we will have a test on Thursday. Friday, we'll have the class meeting. Now for your assignment for today, and I'll hush up because I've gone a little long, longer than I wanted to. On page 324, you will see the section quiz. Now, I want you to do numbers 1 through 5 and turn those in. Your assignment today is worth 10 points. The section quiz is only worth half of that, okay? The other half is going to come in. So do those questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, page 324 in your textbook, section quiz. When you're working on that or before it or however you want to work it, the other 5 points are going to come in that I want you to have someone take a picture, or if you can figure out how to take a selfie while doing it, of you working on your history work. It may be you want to rewind this video a little bit, and here's so-and-so watching the video for history class. Or, doing your section quiz or reading over these couple of pages. Something that has a shot of you working on your history work. I want to see that, and we're encouraged, each class is encouraged to get some pictures where we can put them on Facebook. It helps people know about our school. It helps people see our students and how we're dealing with this. I think it's positive all around. So I'm assigning that. So if you will, submit both of those things, the section quiz and the picture of you working on your history work. If you'll get that to me today, and all in all, you can finish the section quiz in 5 or 6 minutes, take a picture, and you are done for today. And we'll meet back here tomorrow. And don't forget to write down that time for Friday, test Thursday. Miss y'all, praying for you, love you, and we'll see you tomorrow.